Happy Sunday and welcome to part two of book club. I am really enjoying this series, and rereading Ruth's book has been like reigniting all the energy in me. And we are not giving up. Never give up. And I can't wait to tell y'all that that quote is actually in her book. So I am definitely going to be wearing that necklace every day. I might have it made in real gold, honestly. But it's so good to see everyone. And I really want y'all to buy Ruth's book, The Unveiling, because it just can't do it justice in a book club. But you need to buy it. But John Smith writing, Linda, Mr. C, Florida Gulf Coast, Millie, Cheryl, Rebecca, everybody. Awesome. So happy y'all are here. Hey, Sharedole 222 here from Florida. It was on week 3 by mistake, but glad to be here now. Well, welcome. We're happy that you're here. I'm wearing one of the new tees. It just says true with the glasses. These are like my favorite. So I will be sporting these at Crime Con with my cardigans or blazer or whatever. Hey, Armand, good to see you. Marcy. I know exactly, Marcy. That quote is in the book. No coincidence. No. And you know who said it? Her uncle. So yeah. So I think the Markels have the true ownership of the quote. Mia Wallace, good to see you. So I thought we could just kind of jump in because there is a lot to cover. Let me. I thought I'd change this. Hold on. That's not going to work. So y'all know I like the little presentations. It's just easier to keep me on track, keep everybody on track. So tonight, oh, by the way, I'm Leslie B. Of True Crime in a Minute, but this is Leslie B. is my name, and we are covering Ruth Markel's book, The Unveiling. And it is a mother's reflection on murder, grief, and trial life. And I think it's inspirational. You know, most people have never been affected by a murder, but no matter what your trial is that you're going through, and I mean like trial by life challenge, I think there's a lot to take away in this book. So, chapter 3, grief. So, Ruth talks about how she was a child of tragedy and that her father died suddenly of a heart attack when she was only 9 years old, and her mom was 38. They had little means of self-support. And so her mom went to work, which you got to remember, this was 1954. So that was pretty uncommon for women to be working full time. But her mother became a rare example. She said her mom looked like a young Nancy Reagan. She was a model of mastery and determination and grew her ladies' clothing manufacturing company with her 2 brothers. I often feel I owe my career to her. This is page 48. She was involved in banking and union relationships. She often talked about payroll, cash flow, and other issues of business and money. And in an effort to teach, she hid nothing. I treasure this fact. And so I started building my own successful management consulting firm, dealing with large corporations and hospitals. So Ruth's always been a strong businesswoman, and I think a lot of that is been the key to how she has been so graceful through this whole journey for the last almost 14 years. She says, I later wrote books on women's advancement and negotiating skills, a career advantage I learned from my mother. When my father died, my family members swooped in to help my mother, my brother Bob, and me. Harry, my mother's oldest brother, became a ballast with Sunday morning visits after piano lessons. My father's extended family was also very close to us. operating like a clan to support my mother. They never abandoned me or my brother, trying to create as much normalcy as possible. But it was my maternal uncle. And last week I had said Lazar. It's actually pronounced Lazar, Lazar. My mother's younger brother who stepped in the most. Lazar was a father figure to me in no uncertain terms. So last week we covered that she was with him in celebrating his 97th birthday when they got the phone call that Dan had been shot and was not going to make it. And he immediately knew. He said, Makatinum, am I saying that correctly? Um, means the in-laws, and he pounded his fist on the table. When my father died, Lazar was still unmarried. He later married when I was 22. Lazar treated Bob and me like his own children. He was born in Lithuania and survived the Holocaust through efforts of a Catholic family who hid him for 2 years in their barn. I thought that was interesting. We hosted an exchange student years ago from Lithuania. So I thought that was interesting. Lazar stayed in Berlin until 1949. My mother was not a Holocaust survivor and came to Canada at 15 years of age. She married my father, and they both sponsored Lazar to come to Canada. But one thing she says about Lazar, he was the epitome of positive thinking. And this is toward the end of page 49. It would take him a long time before entertaining any negative thoughts. He taught me to, quote, never give up. And we all know we've been saying that, never, never, never give up, because Donna had given Wendi a necklace that said that. But when I read this, I'm like, that is awesome that we have this on this necklace. So I am now, Ma Cha, easier to pronounce Cha as H. Ma Cha Tunim. Ma Cha Tunim. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. So we can now thank Uncle Lazar for the never give up. So this I thought was also interesting. So Ruth's dad and Dan were about the same age at their death. Let me find out where that was. I had it in the book. Hold on. I think one was like 41 and one was 42. She talks about also having biannual visits to the cemetery with her mother to visit her father's grave. We recited a special prayer of Kaddish, y'all, Kaddish, and the clergy recited Kalmela Rachamim. Sorry, I'm probably like making that sound much slower than it should be. This prayer is often recited at funerals and unveilings. Many times, parents today ask at what age their child should visit the cemetery. My experience had led me to believe a child over the age of 5 or 6 can understand death and benefit from the rituals surrounding it, especially for a close family member. And that video that I created about going to my first ever Jewish burial, which was earlier this year, it was actually on January 2nd. It inspired me to make this video. I'm going to play half of it, but I talk about how I just can't believe, we can believe that Wendi never took the boys to see their father's grave, nor for the burial. And yes, we know they were 4 and 5 at the time of the burial. The oldest one had just turned 5. But even if they're not right there at the burial, I think just to be with family is important. So I'm going to play a little bit of this. Actually, I might just play the whole thing. It's like just under 10 minutes. I think it's important, especially as we cover this chapter on grief. As many of you know, I've followed the Dan Markel case for over 2 years. As a mom who lost a child, my heart has always gone out to Ruth Markel. While our circumstances are different, we share something no mother ever wants in common: losing a child. But Ruth's pain didn't stop there. When I heard Wendi testify about changing the boys' last names, I was in disbelief. And then I learned she did not take the boys to Dan's burial in Canada. I can't imagine that. A 5-year old may not understand everything, but being present, being surrounded by family, matters. And what hurts even more is that 11 years later, Wendi has still never taken those boys to their father's grave. They never had the chance to place a rock on Dan's headstone. On Friday, January 2nd, I attended my first Jewish burial. As I arrived, I noticed rocks placed on headstones. I learned that in the Jewish faith, visitors leave stones instead of flowers, symbols of remembrance. Mourners place 3 scoops of dirt on the casket, using the back of the shovel as a final act of loving kindness. As I listened to the cantor sing and heard the dirt fall, I couldn't stop thinking about Dan Markel. I thought about Phil, Ruth, and Shelley. I thought about what they endured and who wasn't there. The night before I attended this burial, I had hosted a YouTube Live where an email from 2016 was shared. Words exchanged about the boys and their grief. It was sickening. And hearing what Wendi told her children and about where their father was, it stayed with me. I'm going to read it for you now. So Wendi emails her mom. This is in 2016, just before her birthday in April. So it's been just under 2 years since Dan was killed. The email starts, "Hi guys. So my birthday is Friday and we're going to do a cake at the office around 1 p.m. I would love it if you and dad and the boys came and had cake. That way you can meet the judge and my co-clerks and see the office and have ice cream. Yes." I contacted Jess, the school counselor, about Ben's morning tears and refusal to go to school. She met with him and he revealed that he misses his dad, that he is in a box under dirt in Canada, and told her that I don't want him talking about it. Sigh. I assured Jess that I constantly create opportunities for him to talk about it, but maybe he preferred to talk with her from time to time. Let me know about Friday. Love you. Me. Then on April 20th, Donna and Harvey, we know it's Donna, writes back to Wendi. Yay, we'd love to celebrate at work with you on Friday. I'll make sure the kids are cleaned up before we go. Sounds great. I wonder if she led Ben into that because I never see any sadness, as that's unusual for a child his age. Who told him he's buried in a box under dirt? His father's family? We certainly never said that. Also, children don't get the concept of missing someone at this age. And it's been almost 2 years. They were so young when it happened. This reminds me of what psychologists like to do with kids. I don't know how much of this are her words or Ben's, just saying, love you, mom. P.S. Heading out to Flaming now with tennis dudes. They both seem perfectly happy and excited to go. On April 20th, Wendi writes her mom back that afternoon. I hope they love tennis. I have the forms for Miami Children's Museum, in case they don't, but maybe we can do a mix of Flamingo and MCM. In terms of who told Ben about the dirt in the box, that was me. A few weeks ago, Lincoln asked if we could dig up his dad so he could hang out with him. And that's when I explained burials and such. Sigh, love you, me. Then on April 20th that night, Donna writes Wendi back. And I do want to point out, so this is April 20th, 2016. The bump happened on April 19th. So just interesting that all that was going on and Donna's trying to act like all is well. Donna writes, Oi, I guess it was one way to describe it. However, I still do not believe that Ben is sad about his father. I spend a minimum of 25 hours a week with him, and oftentimes more than that, including weekend times and sleepover days, and have never, in all caps, experienced a time when he was sad. Dad and I try really hard to keep things happy and positive for both of them. I honestly don't think that's the I don't want to go to school, I'm sick cause. I think it's just another phase of the many, many, many phases that kids go through. The problem is they have a highly intelligent and sensitive mom. I think in time, you'll just let some of this pass because all phases do pass eventually. I love you, sweetheart. Mom. That email and my experience at that burial inspired this video. Please note, the images used are stock photos and stock videos. The boys in the photos are not the Markel boys, except for the photos we've all seen of the boys with Dan. This video represents what I felt that day. The song is in Hebrew, it is AI generated, and reflects the sadness of losing a loved one. Some moments change you forever, and some absences speak louder than words.
Where was Dan Markel buried?
In Toronto.
Were you or your children in attendance at his funeral?
No. I wasn't concerned about the roadblock. They don't have him in their lives day to day, no.
And did you change your children's names after Dan Markel was killed?
About a year after I did.
In what way did you change their names?
I changed their last name and I changed my older son's middle name.
Okay. And you changed their last name from Markel to what?
To mine.
Adelson.
Mm-hmm.
Was Mr. Markel scheduled to leave town the day after he was killed?
I don't remember if he was scheduled to leave town on Friday afternoon or on Saturday morning.
I actually spoke to Wendi and I asked her if we can arrange for the boys, you included, to come to Toronto, let them see where their father grew up, let them see where he's buried. And she said that'll never happen.
Did you have WhatsApp on your phone at that time?
I did. I was trying to turn down Trescott. That's where I used to turn and take just the road I was used to. But there was yellow tape up. And so when I tried to turn, I couldn't turn. So I made a 3-point turn and kept going on Centerville.
But you mentioned 9 times in your law enforcement interview being a suspect, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Did you talk to your brother Charlie on the morning of the murder?
I did.
And does an 18-minute conversation at 9:30 a.m. that day sound correct?
It does. I did not know it was going to happen, and I did not know any details.
Did you provide any information, even unknowingly in hindsight, that you think could have been used to assist the murderers?
I don't think so.
Someone did hire a hitman who did kill Dan Markel, right?
Yes, that happened.
Did Mr. Markel leave you a message on the morning of his murder?
He did.
Okay, and did he indicate on that message that he was going to the gym that morning?
He did.
And specifically, did it tell you he'd be at the gym between 9:15 and 10:30?
I don't remember, but that sounds about right.
Can you tell the jury one way or the other for sure whether you mentioned Dan Markel's travel plans to Charlie during that 18-minute phone call?
I can't say for sure, but I don't see why I would have brought it up. Anyone who's responsible.
I actually spoke to Wendi and I asked her if we can arrange for the boys, you included, to come to Toronto, let them see where their father grew up, let them see where he's buried. And she said that'll never happen.
Thank y'all for watching that with me again. I love watching that. I'm going to read some comments, some great ones. Here for today says, Uncle Laser, never give up. That's right. Christina, yes, that's amazing. He instantly knew. Marcy, I can't even imagine enduring that. Yeah, it's hard to even. Oh, here for today, you got the necklace? I'm so glad. I ordered 3 of them the other day on Amazon. Should arrive any day because I'm going to give some away to some of you lovelies. Mr. C, love that phrase. Used it today. Makatunam. Mahatunam. I don't know, y'all. All right, everyone. Mahatunam. 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 Yeah, what are the odds of that, Christina, right? Mia Wallace. So Ruth not only endured tragically, randomly losing her father without warning, but also then had to endure that experience again regarding her only son. That background is significant. Completely agree. Linda says she won't get the CH sound without hearing it. You're right. Here for today, and her pain, compassion, that much more intense for the grandson's experience. True. Good evening, Jim Richmond. Happy to see you. Christina, I love this video. Thank you. John Smith, that will never happen. So cruel. Yep. She can say that will never happen, but you know what I say? We are never giving up. Cat Ride, Wendi is evil. Oh, let me just put my banner up. Let me just make sure I got that up. Yes, because this is free speech and opinion. Blue River, what a sick woman. I skipped a few. Yep, here for today. She wanted the life insurance ASAP. We're going to get to that. It's in this book club tonight. Marcy, this gives me chills. I know. Armand, if the uncle knew it was the in-laws, then there must have been many bad stuff the in-laws had done during the marriage that the Markels knew about. Well, yeah. I mean, we knew about it at the wedding reception, right? And then we also know before the wedding, Dan goes and talks to his parents and says, hey, Wendi doesn't want us to bring up that I went to Harvard. What? Blue River, what a sick woman. I agree. Here for today, denying the children's reality of sadness is so toxic. Yeah, it's been 2 years. They can't be sad. I've never seen sadness. Having a son myself, who was once that age, he was now a grown adult. When he was little, right, his sister passed, then his dad and I got divorced. I mean, that's a lot. And the one thing they don't want is their parent to see them sad because they're already blaming themselves. That's what kids do. And so they fake things a lot too. And you have to acknowledge their grieving. It's a huge loss. Juliet, hello. Wendi and Adel Scum are guilty of child abuse. Yep. Rebecca, I recall those horrible emails, such horrible people. Jim, yes, this exchange is disgusting. Mr. C, the Adelsons are murdering Mahutunum. Did I say it right? I don't know if I did. Linda, was it after the bump? Yeah. So it was right in the middle of it. The actual bump was the 19th. And then those emails were on the 20th. Mia says, Armand, great observation. Seems difficult to believe that upon learning the horrific news, he blurted out, Mahutunum. It doesn't make sense that he would randomly do that out of the blue. Yeah. Marcy, I'm a retired psychologist. Donna's comment inflames me. Cat Ride, I concur. Donna is right where she needs to be. Arrest Wendi. Here for today. Donna is cruel, self-centered narcissist. Christina, what an utter jerk. Mia, thanks, Leslie, for putting time, attention, detail, and caring into sharing. Oh, y'all are welcome. I'm serious. The night when I went to the funeral on January 2nd, and I came home, and it was still the afternoon because it was still daylight. And it gets dark at like 5 o'clock in January. And I stayed up, I think, until 3 or 4 a.m. And I just had like tears streaming down my face. I just had to like make this video. Kristen says Ruth points out in the book that right after the bump, when Donna calls Charlie, she never mentions Katie, even though the undercover guy did mention Katie. That's right. So we're going to cover that too. Hey, Pumpkin, good to see you. This breaks my heart for Ruth and Phil. Mia, if Donna really cared about Dan's sons the way Donna claimed to at her sentencing, then that would have been a more meaningful, purposeful, and helpful thing than to promise they'd get to the bottom what happened to their father and make sure everything was addressed possible. I agree. Cat Ride. Donna deserves life in jail. Arrest Wendi. Yep. Armand, why she went to Trescott always puzzled me. I agree, Pumpkin. Those boys lost so much more that day than Wendi or Donna cared about. Mia says, yes, their actions following the murder are so revealing and damning. I agree. Kristen, all Georgia has to do to get conviction is point out the behavior and activity before and after the murder. I agree. Kristen, Ruth lays it all out in the book. She sure does. Yeah. Wendi wasn't concerned about the roadblock. That's right here for today. Marcy, it's still so unbelievable that they arranged and completed this murder. Hope everyone ends up behind bars. Wendi and Harvey too. Rebecca, I did not know any details. Confession. Ava, thank you. Leslie, this video, the music shows your immense understanding of loss and grief. You're very brave. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, when you've had the loss that I've had, now my child wasn't murdered. She was ill, but nonetheless, my child, it is something you can't explain. And people are like, I don't know how you do it. Well, let me tell you how you do it. You do what you have to do. So, the grief you can't put into words. Juliet, they are demonic. Christina, beautiful. Leslie, thank you. Pumpkin, cold, heartless people. It's a beautiful tribute. It's so beautiful. Thank you. Linda, they'll hit 18. There's no going back. Anna Luisa Calvillo, I hope I'm saying that right. That song makes me cry. It's so sad. Wendy's actions are so loud. Yeah, they are brainwashed. I agree. Hey, Julia Nelson, good to see you. Thank you, Cheryl. Leslie, the video you created is amazing and goes straight to the heart. Thank you all. Hey, Jenny, good to see you. All right. There's so many good comments, but I'm gonna move on because there is a lot to cover. So, are y'all okay? You want the screen a little bigger there? All right. So I did find while we were playing that. So I mentioned that her dad and Dan were about the same age when they died. So she says, Ruth says, this is on page 50, about the middle of the page. My father and Dan were nearly the same age when they died. My father, 42, my son, 41. So now I am both a child and a mother of early death. And what has become clear to me through both instances is that while death is grief, it is also work. And that is true. She said, my life is now the center of a tragedy filled with a shooting, the death of my 41-year-old son, still my youngest child, from murder. The trauma is all being relived again due to the criminal justice process and trials. My life has changed in a way that I will never fully understand. This death, Dan's murder, is incomprehensible and final. Then she talks about my primary grief is, of course, in losing Dan. But the second arrow of my grief is in the subsequent alienation from Dan's two young sons, Benjamin and Lincoln, with whom I seek reconnection. Grandparent visitation has been the focus of my advocacy. I will discuss more details on the subject later. I'm working on a bill in Florida to expand existing law and provide grandparents with greater access to courts to petition for visitation with grandchildren in extraordinary circumstances. My ethos when it comes to this topic has been ingrained in me from my childhood by Uncle Laser. Never give up. I freaking love that. I'm not going to take that necklace off. Never, never, never give up. So then this is on page 51. She says, by mid-April 2014, Dan and the boys came to Toronto for Passover. After the trauma of Dan and Wendy's divorce, including my own maternal pain from seeing my son suffering and that of Benjamin and Lincoln, it felt like the worst was over, like we were reaching a new, happier family plateau. And already, he and the boys were coming to Toronto more freely. I felt we were moving toward a new reality. Dan was very family oriented and loved bringing the children to Toronto, especially on holidays. And she talks about some memories when the boys were there. Then also, but only several months later, in July 2014, these sweet memories felt like something from another life. My son was murdered at the age of 41 in his garage. Benjamin and Lincoln's new world was fatherless. My new world was as the mother of a slain professor. Phil had no living son. Shelley, no brother. Suddenly, Dan was gone, and we were all homicide survivors. Cheryl, that is so kind. Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that. That was very kind. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing us together and sharing the video in Ruth's book. This is for Cosmo at CrimeCon. Thank you. That is so kind. Cheryl, you definitely get me. That is accurate. Cynical says, Wendi wasn't good enough to get into Harvard. She was never good. Harvey and Donna bought Charlie's degree. It wouldn't surprise me if they did the same for Wendi as well. You do kind of wonder. Yeah. CrimeCon Cosmo. Ooh, that's a good idea. You wonder if Ruth knew her virtual meetings would be recorded. If not, aren't there laws against that? Depends on the state. And I think she's pretty savvy business lady. She probably had an idea. Different laws in different states, yeah. Oh, Kristen, yay, you're wearing your Clever Beauty shirt. Oh, thanks, Melissa. I think that's what originally drew me to this. I didn't realize you two lost a child. You cover this horrific story with such grace and eloquence. Now makes sense. So sorry for your loss. Thank you. Okay. All right. I read the memories in Toronto, and she talks about the survivors. They're all homicide survivors. She said, I began the grieving process, which has no end and no normalcy. I felt numb after the shock and was in disbelief because Dan's death was so sudden. It was hard to comprehend, which soon prompted questions. How did this happen? Who would do this? Why did this happen? I was in a daze, and when I got out of it 5 weeks after the murder, there was much to do. I am not the only homicide survivor. Phil, Shelley, and her family, as well as Benjamin and Lincoln, are all homicide survivors. This also includes Dan's girlfriend and many other family and friends. Our immediate family was disrupted. I became removed from everything and shattered. My life as I knew it felt like a personal earthquake. She does such a good job putting all this into words. At this time, no suspects had been identified by authorities. Many media outlets were beginning to put together assumptions of their own. Over the course of that weekend, the story of Dan's case greatly evolved. Many news stories speculated whether it was possible that Dan had been shot during an attempted home robbery, with some community members noting that there had been a series of burglaries in Dan's neighborhood in the months prior. At the time of his death, I was still in Montreal and traveled to Florida the morning of July 19th, only 24 hours after the shooting. It wasn't until July 21st that the robbery hypothesis and all others involving random acts were put to bed. So then she talks about how the Tallahassee police released a statement stating that Dan's murder appeared to have been targeted, that Dan was the intended victim. People were wondering, was the shooter a student or a colleague over bad grades or opinions? Some of the content posted on his well-known blog, Pross blog, had received some criticism in the past. Could the murder have been on ideological grounds? It was still so overwhelming and had not yet focused on motive or speculated on the murder. So then a reward for $1,000 for information that could lead to an arrest was offered by Crime Stoppers. Dan's friends later offered a $100,000 reward, which was organized with the Tallahassee Police Department. So I also went and found let me see, Prof's blog and the David Latt link. So I'm going to share. I had never gone to Prof's blog, which I couldn't believe. I know this is tiny print. So this is showing June 2014, and then I'm going to click on July 2014. It's taking a second. I had all these windows open yesterday, so I don't know. Oh, come on. Okay. It was pretty amazing to read all this. So there was a post on Friday, July 18th. So this was before the shooting. Then posted by Paul Horwitz on July 19th, 2014 at 5:50 p.m. So this was that Saturday night. This is a tragic story. Oh, no, that wasn't it. Sorry, my bad. All right. Saturday, July 19th. We have lost a beloved friend, Dan Markel. We write this together, all of us, as a community. Our friend, Dan Markel, has been taken from us suddenly and terribly. His law school, the Florida State University College of Law, will issue an announcement in due time. We do not have all the details, but our understanding is that Dan was shot and killed. Painful as it is to say that as little as we know, the early news reports left enough room for speculation that it seemed necessary to say that much. The terrible, senseless nature of his loss makes it all harder to bear. All of us here at Prof's blog live in different places and come from different backgrounds. What we have in common with many others is Dan, his network of friends and loved ones, and he had a great deal of love for all his friends, and as we did and do for him, is enormous. His boundless energy was at the center of this community. It made it run. It gave it life. We are stunned and bereaved by his loss, and our thoughts go to his two little boys who are precious to him and to his family. Many people loved him and are grieving today. Baruch Dahin Emmett. Sorry, I know I probably botched that. And then it lists all the names, I guess, of the people with the Pross blog. And then this lists all the different memorials they had. So this was on Tuesday, July 22nd. So much outpouring of affection for our friend. At Brooklyn Law School, as we speak, it's on the 22nd floor of Field Hall, 205 State Building. Get there if you can. Number 2, correction. The informal gathering at Harvard happened on Wednesday, yesterday. Apologize for the confusion. 3, funeral in Shiva in Toronto on Thursday. You can email any of the permafrost for more details. 4, Florida State will sponsor a memorial at the upcoming SEALs Conference at Amelia Island on Monday, August 4th. 5, also at SEALs will be the first ever Markel Fest on Saturday evening, August 2nd. 6, Law and Society's Collaborative Research Network will host a panel in Dan's memory on retribution at the 2015 Law and Society Association. We will post information about other local gatherings and memorials and efforts as we receive them. Is that not unbelievable? How many different memorials for Dan? Wow. Then I know we've shared different things about David Latt, who has this blog, Above the Law. So he talks about, as I mentioned in my earlier story about Dan Markel, I knew Dan since our days working together on the Harvard Crimson, which was the school paper. Back then, he was Dan E. Markel, class of 95, and I was David B. Latt, class of 96. We both wrote columns and would edit each other's work. We didn't often agree. I was more conservative back then, and he was, well, not conservative. But we respected each other's thinking and writing. After graduating from Harvard, Cambridge University, and Harvard Law School, Dan went on to have a tremendous career in law practice and teaching. He clerked for Judge Michael Daley Hawkins on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and worked as an associate at Kellogg Huber, the insanely elite D.C. litigation boutique. This is the one that Donna was really mad that he left. He then joined the faculty of the Florida State University College of Law, where at the time of his death, he held an endowed chair as D'Alberte Professor of Law, a prolific scholar in the areas of criminal law and punishment. He published numerous law review articles, pieces for general interest news outlets like the New York Times and Slate, and a book, Privilege or Punish, Criminal Justice and the Challenge of Family Ties. But Dan was much more than the sum of his resume items. Here are some testimonials and memories from myself and others who knew him. Dan's death came as a shock to his friends and family. The past year or so hadn't been easy for Dan in the wake of his divorce from Wendi Adelson. But things seemed to be looking up for him, as reported by the Toronto Star. NYU law professor Rick Hills Jr. last saw Markel when the Florida resident stayed with him in New York just 2 weeks ago. Markel had not told his friends yet, but he told Hills that he was happy in a new relationship with a woman after going through divorce with the mother of his children in the past 2 years. He was rebuilding his life after a really, really difficult period. Hills said, I was watching him as he was in my apartment, Skyping his kids and saying goodnight on his cell phone. He was so happy. I won't go on to read all of this, but it's an excellent read. So this is the Above the Law on July 21st, 2014. Okay. And let's see. All right, we're still in chapter 3, grief. So Ruth reflects on the Pross blog. She says the influential blog Dan co-founded posted a heartfelt entry on July 19th, 2014, which I just read, which speaks to the stunned confusion we all felt at that time. We write this together, all of us as a community, wrote Pross blog colleague Paul Horowitz. For another law blog, Above the Law, David Latt wrote, but Dan was much, much more than the sum of his resume items, which I also just read. Then she says, I often still think of my last phone call with Dan. So he left Premier and he had a kind of a tradition, ritual to call his mom when he was in the car and headed home. He would never talk on the phone when he had the boys with him. So we know they were at Creative Preschool. So during her last phone call with Dan on that Friday morning in 2014, just minutes before he was shot, he was coming back from the gym. I was in Montreal. We had a normal talk as usual, covering the boys and weekend plans and a bit of this and that. I often think that there was some luck in him being on the phone with someone else, not me, when the bullet hit. If I had actually heard my son being murdered, I don't know if I could have come back from that. Then further down on page 55, she says, there are no words in the English language describing a person who has lost a child. We have words for widow, widower, and orphan, but none for a parent who has outlived their son, their daughter. Life's progression comes to a stop when you lose a child. It feels like nothing is happening as it should, and everything is flipped upside down. I now have a new identity. This is at the bottom of page 55. I have become known as the mother of the slain professor. All right, let me see what some of the comments are. Brooklyn says, Leslie, have you seen a picture of Dan Markel's cemetery plot? I would send that picture to Donna and Charlie in jail. Yeah. But, they still don't think they had anything to do with it. Kristen says, is it fair to say that Dan was only in Florida so Wendi could finish her schooling in Miami? So she actually had to finish her last year of law school at Florida State, but I think because most of her hours were at Miami, she got the Miami certificate. I think that's right. I believe, I don't know if it's in this book or where I read, but I thought he really liked Tallahassee because he thought it was like a good place to raise a family. And we know that's what he wanted more than anything else. Here for today. Can you imagine what amazing things Dan could be doing now? And Kristen also will say, yes, he was at Florida State, but he was being recruited by lots of schools. But I think it was one of his friends that said he had really grown to like Tallahassee. It was just a good place to raise those boys. Maestro says, for it to be coming from someone who called themselves conservative, yet they were still his friend. Oh, I agree. I was thinking this too. Cheryl, I would be interested in reading Dan's paper you mentioned, Criminal Justice and the Challenge of Family Relationships. If that's not Shakespearean, I agree. We need to read this. Actually, I'm going to write that down. Well, I'll remember. I'll come back and look at it. Julia, Dan made tenure at FSU, so once that happens, you wouldn't change law schools. Yeah, he was tenured after just like 4 years. All right. So, I'm just going through this book. I just decided this time, I just marked a bunch of different stuff instead of typing it all out. Reflections on Dan's birth, page 56. She says, and Phil has said this, I believe it was in his victim impact statement at Charlie's sentencing. I still remember, this is Ruth, I still remember giving birth to Dan and what it was like when he entered the world. He was born big, 9.15 pounds, but he always had an easy temperament. But unlike most babies, Dan didn't sleep in the daytime until he was 3 months old. He woke up at 6 a.m. and stayed up until 7 p.m., almost like an older person with a job to do. He was just so alert, so high energy. These attributes were his enduring signature until the end of his life. He was a person who made life happen. He was very social and had friends all over the world. I always saw so much of Dan and his kids, in Benjamin's inquisitiveness and in Lincoln, who was a look-alike of Dan. Benjamin was just turning 5 and Lincoln was almost 4 when their father was shot dead. Their loss is surely the greatest. They've lost love, roots, direction, commitment, and dedication. Dan's murder will bring the children's lifelong and complex questions, learning about how and when and where their father was killed will affect their mental life, family life, and well being. At the time of writing, Benjamin and Lincoln continue to be cut off from their lineage, as they are not able to see me or Phil or any family on Dan's side, neither uncles, nor aunts, nor cousins, which adds more pain and loss for all of Dan's family and friends. They may not even know the names they were given at birth. Ooh, that's, I mean, I'm sure now they probably know the names they were given because they've seen it in trials, but you think about Ruth. So she lost her dad at a young age, and then she loses her son, and then she has these kids, she can't have a relationship with them. They're grandsons. During this period, I could not shake the feeling that I was having an out-of-body experience, like I was living some other life, not mine. The chaos felt unsurmountable. I cried in private. Around others, I was sometimes still numb. After the initial 5-day stay in Tallahassee, we accompanied Dan's body back to Toronto for the funeral, which we had to organize. Then there were subsequent memorials at FSU, Harvard, Cambridge, New York, Washington, D.C., Phoenix, California, and finally Israel, where Dan had spent a year studying philosophy. We attended the FSU Memorial in Tallahassee in September of 2014, a major event with speeches, displays, university visits, and a dinner. I meant to look to see if I could find photos of that, but I forgot. I was looking up the other stuff. She says, in my experience, grief has been nothing like this. So she talks about there is a famous Kubler-Ross model of grief after the passing of a loved one, which has it coming in emotional stages. First, denial, then anger, then bargaining, then depression, and finally, acceptance. In my experience, grief has been nothing like this. Closure does not exist when a death mingles with an unending trial and a life turned over to law enforcement and lawyers. Before Dan's death, I was a content person. I look at that person now and see how lucky she was. I suffer from what is commonly known as complicated grief. Complicated grief can manifest as an ongoing inability to experience normal grief reactions. Armand says, Wendi not visiting Donna in prison makes this situation even more insane. There is so much darkness in the background. I agree. Julia says, Dan was noble in teaching as he could have made way more cash, but he shaped future lawyers in such a quality way, a true loss to the world. That's very well said. Yep. Kristen says, Dan fell in love with Tally. Yeah, Jenny, the Adelsons didn't pull the trigger. That makes them innocent. I agree. I think Tallahassee looks really lovely with all the trees. It does seem like a great place to raise a family. Maestro, Dan's papers are brilliant. Yeah. Julia, Wendi sold them down the river. Armand, one possibility to explain the timing of the Laura letters and Facebook posts is that one of the boys had stumbled onto these channels. Yeah, could be. Could be. Brooklyn, I doubt it. I wonder if Robert and Harvey have spoken once since the trial. No, I don't think so. Don't think so. This is page 58. I am not the most observant Jew, but the traditions relating to death and the cemetery have become, over the years, a huge part of my identity as a Jew and a woman. They have been a comfort to me, especially at family gatherings where the emptiness I feel the loss of Dan is there, even more than usual. And the usual question, that's not easy either. I get this too. In my day to day life, people often ask, how many children do you have? I answer by saying I have 5 grandchildren, 3 in Canada and 2 in the United States. For most people, that is enough. In very select situations, such as medical assessments, I will share about having lost my son to explain causes of stress. I totally get what she's saying here. I know, I mean, people, it's just like a benign question. People are like, how many kids do you have? You just kind of say it. I mean, I've said it when I'm like, Leslie, you know better than to ask people that. And just sometimes I don't want to go into it. I'm like, I have a son or I have 2, but it can just lead to other questions. And my son, one time when I was like, yep, he's the only child, he's like, Mom, I can't believe you would deny my sister. But it wasn't that. It's a lot to go into with the cashier at the grocery store. Um, she said, usually I wait until the appointment is over to let the person treating me know that my son was murdered because it's always shocking to everyone. Even today, 7 years later, I am still often asked impossible questions. What was it like when you got the news? How often do you still cry over Danny? What keeps you from just curling up in the fetal position and never getting out of bed? So then I love this next part. Okay. Notice the background of this photo is money. So now she's, she kind of bounces around. This is why I love her writing because it's just the way she shares it. It just makes you want to keep reading more and more and more. Within days of Dan's death, when his body was still at the local morgue, Tallahassee police searched his office and house for cash, and more importantly, for financial documents that might provide any evidence. They found a life insurance policy, but no will. I told the police I was surprised they were getting into money so soon after my son's death. There was no burglary or any loan sharks or debt issues in Dan's life. The police explained that following the money trail could still be a very good way to provide solid leads in solving the case. The police knew that Wendi asked about Dan's insurance policy just days after the death. This set off alarm bells for investigators. During Dan and Wendy's separation and divorce, there was a lot of disagreement about money. Dan had taken a large life insurance policy around 2012 during the period when he and Wendi were in marriage counseling, and Wendi knew she was the beneficiary. Following the divorce, Dan changed all the policies, pensions, and investments so that Benjamin and Lincoln were the sole and equal beneficiaries. He did not have a will, and most of his assets had specific designations to the children or went to the estate. But the largest amount was the life insurance policy. Shortly after Dan's murder, Wendi was hungry to know who the beneficiaries were and kept on calling the insurance company for exact details. So tell me what y'all think about that. Cynical. You're funny. Yep, here for today. We're about to get to that, the GoFundMe. All right. She talks about how wonderful FSU was. They met with the university's human resources department. They helped them navigate all Dan's holdings connected to the university, including his pension, health benefits, and insurance. Shelley ultimately hired a lawyer named Sarah Butters, who at the time was with Tallahassee firm Holland and Knight, and has since joined the Osley McMullen law firm. Shelley and Phil became Dan's personal representatives, creating and a state bank account, dealing with Visa card issues, and getting up to speed on all other personal and financial issues such as creditors. Then she says, a GoFundMe page was started by Dan's friend, Tamara Demko, to get some immediate donations. We are so appreciative to Dan's family and friends for the considerations. The proceeds of the fund were later put in trusts for Benjamin and Lincoln. Wendi had tried to attain the GoFundMe donations directly, claiming to be Dan's widow, which added further grief and drama to the process. So I found this. This is July 25th, 2014. This is the National Jurist paper. Donations are pouring in for the children of a well-known criminal law professor at Florida State University College of Law who was murdered on July 18th. Dan Markel, who taught criminal law and was a co-founder of Prof's Blog, a blog for academic law professors, was killed by a gunshot to the head while at his home in an affluent neighborhood in Tallahassee. Tamara Demko, who met Markel when he was a student at Harvard Law School, set up a memorial fund to raise money for his two sons. It had raised $48,634 in the first 3 days. My heart is just shattered, Demko told AP. I just don't know what I'm going to do without him in my life. He's been part of it for so long. So, wow. Can you imagine, like, calling and saying you're the widow? Then it talks about the bottom. Markel recently went through a contentious divorce with Wendi Adelson, who also worked at Florida State's law school as the director of the Medical Legal Partnership Public Interest. Hold on, I'm coughing. Ugh. She was the director of the Medical Legal Partnership of the Public Interest Law Center. The couple were still trying to resolve custody and financial matters related to the divorce. A spokesman for the Tallahassee Police Department said there are no suspects and could not provide details on why the victim was targeted. However, police announced that Markel was likely the attacker's intended victim, as there were no signs of forced entry in an effort to calm the frightened community. The investigation has provided no indication that this case is connected to a burglary or robbery, the police said. There is no evidence this is a random act. Okay. Oh, at the bottom, this is what Julia was saying earlier. Markel, who was 41 when he died, joined Florida State in 2005, and he received tenure in 2010. He married Adelson in 2006 when she was 25 and a third-year law student at University of Miami. Adelson filed for divorce in 2012. Here for today. Glad it was for the sons. I had read somewhere it was for airfare and hotel for Markel, so I guess that was not correct. Yeah. I think they're fine. Kristen, Isom knew from the get-go when she drove by that this was a hit. Yeah. Juliet says corrupt state attorneys protected them and still protect Wendi. You said Meggs and Campbell are corrupt. Yeah, Mia Wallace. Remember Charlie on the wiretap suggesting it was a drug deal gone wrong? He must have forgotten about that when he cooked up the double extortion plot. Yeah. Rebecca says state attorney now isn't protecting Wendi. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So then this is on page 61. One major discussion involved Wendi directly. Wendi requested upkeep funds for expenses such as rent and food from the boys' trusts. As I mentioned before, there were numerous other sources of funds, such as the pension and investments through the university. Wendi was also receiving $2,400 per month for each child from the government Social Security because their father was deceased. Wendi was entitled to take over the ownership of the house on Trescott, where Dan had lived. But almost symbolically, a few months after Dan's death, a tree fell on the roof, causing major damage. There were just so many complications and issues concerning money, began creating tensions between us and Wendi. Everyone walked on eggshells. So then Ruth talks about October 2014. So what's that, about 3 months after the shooting? While all of the estate issues were happening, I wanted to continue seeing Benjamin and Lincoln. I visited Benjamin and Lincoln every few months with my Canadian grandchildren. In October 2014, I decided to take a pre-planned trip along with Shelley and her family from Toronto to Florida to visit Wendi and the boys. It was my 70th birthday present to myself. We stayed in Orlando and drove to meet Wendi and my grandsons at the Butterfly Conservatory in South Florida. When Wendi showed up, it was not just with the kids, but also with Donna, Harvey, and other friends. I realized then that since Dan's death, she still hadn't been alone with me. Benjamin and Lincoln were happy and excited as they looked at the amazing tropical insects and watched butterflies hatch. I then noticed that the Adelsons would not leave me alone with the children for even a minute, hovering very closely at all times. Even when Benjamin gave me my first long hug since his father's death, the Adelsons were standing nearby and monitored the encounter. At one point during this outing, Donna came up to me when I was sitting alone and said, "Who would have done such a thing in broad daylight?" I was already sad while watching the children. I did not want to talk about murder. Prior to our leaving, I wanted a quiet moment with Wendi to discuss the unveiling. Harvey quietly came over to eavesdrop on the conversation. Wendi had not attended the funeral in Toronto, and I felt that I wanted to give her and our grandsons an opportunity to attend the unveiling. We then said our goodbyes and returned to Orlando with Shelley and her kids. I was feeling strange and uncomfortable. It was hard for me to say goodbye. Okay, so this next part is about there was a little lawsuit between the emergency services, the dispatch. So when Mr. Geiger called 911 when he heard the shooting, it took, I think it was, what she said here, like 19 minutes for the ambulance to arrive. The media in Tallahassee brought major attention to the long ambulance wait, and there were many criticisms piled on the Consolidated Dispatch Agency, the company in charge of sending ambulances out. An advisor informed us that we had a fiduciary responsibility to Benjamin and Lincoln to sue the agency. On the recommendation of some of Dan's colleagues, we hired Eric Abramson as our lawyer on the case. It took over a year to reach a settlement. We ended up claiming $40,000 from their liability insurance to avoid further litigation. The money was paid into Benjamin's and Lincoln's trusts. Yep, Kristen, 19 minutes. Yeah, Mia Wallace on it is next level cruel. Rebecca says, yeah, lose the Social Security at 18, right? Cat ride. Harvey showed his true self. Yep. Ooh. All right. So then continuing on in chapter 3, she talks about what a full plate Shelley, Dan's sister, has. Shelley had a full plate as mother of 3 children. Michael, who was 14, Ari, then 11, and Roni, then 8. Shelley was also very active in the Jewish community, graduated in law, and earned an MBA. Ian, her husband, originally worked as a lawyer, but later became a business executive. Shelley and the family have been very blessed with Ian's contributions as well. So for Shelley, the burden is still ongoing. Every year, she needs to deal with financial, tax, and estate matters. Shelley will also need to handle Benjamin and Lincoln's trusts. Her husband, Ian, has been a great support through all of this. Ruth also talks about her first degree is a master's in social work. Over my career, I've worked with families who have lost children, usually to illness like cancer. Bereavement of a death of a child is long term. In Toronto, I'd always been known as Ruth Markel, a successful businesswoman and author. Now I was Ruth Markel, whose son was killed in his garage from a gunshot to his brain. The first time my family had to stand up at Yizkor on Yom Kippur, the memorial part of the service where bereaved families remember and bless their dead, it was very heart-wrenching. Since I was 9 years old, I had been standing for various family members, including my parents. But this was the first time Phil, Shelley, and I stood up in a very public place and identified ourselves as the family grieving the murder of our son and our brother. In the Toronto community, Dan's case was by then well known, which made it feel harder and very visible. She talks about just all the deep sadness she had. She said she really felt really pretty numb on so much of this. It was like an out-of-body experience up until the unveiling, which is when they removed the cloth over his tombstone that's shown here in the picture. And that's usually done in the first year in the Jewish faith. But for him, it was 9 months. She said, we needed to figure out what to say, but also wanted to write something that really reflected Dan. Common inscriptions, such as loving father, son, brother, and friend, always cherished, were not enough. We went through numerous drafts and consultations with friends and the monument designer. We wanted to get so much on the stone that we needed to make sure there was room. Our final inscription reads as follows: in loving memory of Daniel Eric Markel, beloved father, son, brother, and friend. October 9th, 1972 to July 19th, 2014. His children were his world, his family, friends, and community, his pillars. His academic work, his passion. His light above so bright that it will never be extinguished. Nothing could have prepared me for the emotions I experienced prior to the unveiling. The reality of planning for this moment was difficult. I was no longer in a haze like I was during the funeral. The weeks prior to the unveiling were my deepest feelings of sadness. I was not numb. Selecting the actual tombstone brought me back from my out-of-body experience. She also talks about placing small rocks on the head of the tombstone. So that was that video I showed y'all earlier. It's a Jewish tradition. It's really a custom more than a law. Placing pebbles on a tombstone is widely practiced and for relatively the same reasons that headstones are placed. From the time Jacob set a stone at the burial place of his beloved wife Rachel on the road to Ephrat, Bethlehem, Genesis 35:20, since then, setting tombstones over graves, in Hebrew, they are called masavat, probably butchered that, I'm sorry, has been a custom revered by Jews. The stone is a sign that the living remember the dead. The pebbles on the stone are like the stone itself. They are signs that this is a pious family who visits the grave of their loved one. Let's see. There's so many comments. Rebecca, just because we read between the lines doesn't mean a jury with no previous knowledge will go there. I want Wendi in prison, but state attorney has only one chance. Kristen, yep, Rebecca, I'm right there with you. It has to be a slam dunk. Melissa, Carl has shown enough evidence for a slam dunk. Here for today, no statute of limitations on murder. Maybe just keep dragging it out so Wendi has to think about it. Cynical Cindy. Wendi is being watched, but in the meantime, I hope Charlie wakes up and flips because she and Donna convinced him to ruin his life. Yeah, y'all are good. Ruth on page 67, she says, I always had an honest relationship with Dan. I knew that day that I would often return to visit him here in the years to come. Returning to visit him at the cemetery is my solace. It is where I would share the progress and accomplishments of his young sons, Benjamin and Lincoln, and report to him the difficult discoveries that will emerge over the course of the investigation into his murder. What I did not know on the day of the unveiling was just how soon I would be back at this solemn spot to give Dan bad news about his children and his ex-wife. And then this is the end of the book, the chapter, The Grief, chapter 3, talking about the unveiling. Many of the guests were pale and flushed with lots of tears and tissues as we shared a common sorrow. As I stood between all these people, I thought of the beautiful poem read by Rabbi Aaron at the gravesite, trying to take its words to heart. Do not stand by my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am the thousand winds that blow. I am the diamond glints in snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. As you awake with morning's hush, I am the swift, upflinging rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the day transcending night. Do not stand by my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. Okay, so now this goes to part 2 of the book, and she calls part 2 of the book Reality, and chapter 4 is the arrests. And so before she goes into the chapter, she has the timeline. So I created my own here on this slide. So we've got Sigfredo Garcia's arrest on May 25th, 2016. The probable cause affidavit was released June 2nd, 2016. So remember that judge sealed it so nobody could read it because it exposed Katie and Sigfredo. Didn't want to give anybody a heads up. Then Luis Rivera was arrested June 17th, 2016. So we know he was already in Coleman Federal Prison, but he was arrested for this murder. Catherine McBanawa was arrested October 1st, 2016, and then the trial of Garcia and McBanawa was September 26, 2019. So then chapter 4, arrests. The first year. My primary contact was Craig Isom, the lead investigator. And she really loves Isom. She talks about all the things he did. So I'm on a positive Isom kick now. Who provided me with regular updates. I would share them on family conferences with our personal attorney, Matthew Benjamin, and other Gibson Dunn lawyers, including Orrin Snyder. Phil and Shelley worked on the estate issues. Shelley also had the responsibility of all the investments and income tax follow-ups. She talks about the cloud of grief was particularly pronounced during the early period of the investigation. As Candace Leitner, the founder of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, writes, grief comes in 3 stages: the beginning, the middle, and the rest of your life. Page 72. A year after Dan's death, police released a photo of the Toyota Prius they believed was driven by the suspect. So I've got this is the clearer picture. So originally they released like a very grainy picture, but this was the one they got from the buses. Rebecca says, Georgia is a rock star, but she's not the boss. Yeah. Kristen, she calls him Craig in the book. And I'm like, who? Oh, Isom. Hey, YB, it's good to see you. I'm sorry I can't get to everybody's. Hey, Plays in the Dirt, good to see you. Kristen, I like that. Ruth could start a group, mother-in-laws against unindicted co-conspirator daughter-in-laws. I like that a lot. As Dan's case remained a mystery, I found myself at the center of a large murder community. Numerous people we know and even strangers wanted to offer their advice and help solve this case. Can you imagine? Just think of all of us and how much this has grown. At times, I felt I was running a detective agency by myself. Dan's friends made epic gestures. Two of them helped finance the $100,000 reward for a tip leading to the arrest and conviction of those who committed the murder. She says law enforcement was quite tight-lipped in the early years, and there were no indications of any breakthroughs. There was some criticism of law enforcement initially, with the concern that nothing was happening or not enough was being done. Of course, nobody could know what investigators were working on behind the scenes. Dan's best man, Matt Price, introduced me to his father-in-law, Abe Anhang, I don't know how to pronounce that, whose own son, Adam, was murdered by the woman he married, a rare female killer, Aria Vasquez Rijos, who plotted Adam's murder for hire. So if y'all remember in Wendy's interview when they're trying to talk about who they might call to tell about Dan, maybe to even reach the Markels, she's like, well, if y'all are thinking about Mike Price, just heads up, this could trigger him, because basically they had a family member murdered. She said, Abe has lived through the trial life for more than a decade, seeking justice for his son. He generously offered to share his experience and provide me with guidance, weighing in on concepts from coping with media to prepping for the jury and counseling me to divide up tasks so that the burden didn't fall on only one person. I started referring to Abe as my murder coach. And I couldn't help but think, and this might be kind of grasping at straws, but remember how the Adelsons called Rob Honest Abe because he returned the penny? It's like Abe is like the good person in the story, you know? I just thought that was crazy. As progress proceeded at a glacial pace regarding any publicity released information with breaks in the case, I learned to tolerate the hurtful actions of my former daughter-in-law for the sake of maintaining contact with my grandchildren. In fact, prior to the arrest, I was visiting Benjamin and Lincoln, who were living in South Beach area of Miami, where Wendi had decamped so quickly after Dan's murder. Getting to see them was worth every word unspoken, every question unasked, and every bit of swallowed pride it took to maintain good rapport with their mother. I got to tell y'all, she's a better woman than me. In September 2015, Wendi hurt us deeply by emailing me to tell us matter-of-factly that she had changed the boy's last name from Markel to Adelson the prior July for safety's sake, as she said. The timing of her disclosure was no coincidence. We were scheduled to visit her and the boys the next day. The boys had recently started school, and their drawings already featured their new names, such as one we would see hung on the wall, Lincoln Adelson. This was undeniably disingenuous. There was no safety issue for the boys that could relate to their last name. But that hurt would not be the last. The perception of her deceit was compounded when we discovered that she had decided to remove Benjamin's middle name, Amakai, chosen to honor my mother. Changing their last name was also particularly hurtful to Phil, whose only son had kept his family name alive through his American grandsons. And then she goes in to talk about what Dan had shared about the naming of the boys. And I'm not going to read all that. Y'all need to get the book. And by the way, if anybody's interested in buying the book, so the ones they sell now on Amazon are paperback, but they used to have the hardcover books. But Ruth still has some of the hardcover ones that are autographed. So if y'all are interested in buying one, so she would have to ship them from Canada. So it'd be more expensive, but you could get an autographed copy. If you're interested, email me. I want to see how much interest there is. So if you are, send me that. Armand, great point. I got to open this door, y'all. I'm like sweating. Okay. Whew. It's getting me emotional. All right. Armand, why would unindicted co-conspirators remain unindicted forever? Wasn't Donna and Charlie unindicted co-conspirators too? Yeah, so originally, I think in Sigfredo's, I think Christian just posted that. Sigfredo's, in his probable cause, it names Katie and Charlie. And then it was at Charlie's trial, Donna, Harvey, and Wendi were all named as unindicted co-conspirators. I think that's how it went. Kristen says, yes, Ruth mentions that in the book too. After Sigfredo is arrested, they see the documents that call Charlie and Donna unindicted co-conspirators and were shocked. That's right. So then Ruth writes, this is again about the name change on page 75. I have no idea how deleting someone's middle name helps keep them safe from harm. And she didn't explain. With Danny out of the picture, Wendi acted as though she was finally free to make choices for the children unfettered by his preferences. Nevertheless, at that same time, I felt I had to accept these very painful actions because I did not want to be cut off from the boys, particularly as it was becoming clear that our former daughter-in-law and our family were taking steps to diminish the boys' memory of their father, including by removing his name from their own. It felt more important than ever for Phil, Shelley, and me to remain present in their lives. That same month was also the 1-year anniversary of Dan's murder. The police, who had been very quiet since my son was laid to rest, held a press conference where they announced the $100,000 reward in addition to the Crime Stoppers reward. They had little else to report. Shelley, Phil, and I tried to remain patient as the months ticked by. Wendi, Donna, Harvey, and Wendy's brother, Charlie, lawyered up. It's 2015. But unlike our team, their attorney went public in print and on TV about Dan and the case, saying that the family had nothing to hide. Here's something I discovered about the trial life. It's an agony of waiting. I mean, imagine how, like, we're all getting impatient. Imagine what she's been through. So now I'm on page 76. She says, every time I traveled to Florida, I consulted children's psychologists to understand how to talk to the boys about this tragedy. I thought how selfless that is for her. I mean, just always making them a priority, making sure she wants to, be age appropriate for these boys. One piece of advice I was given was to wait and not bring up Dan unless the boys did so first. In the months prior to the arrest, Craig gave some good news, Craig Isom, that he was working full-time on Dan's case, and there was a slight change of tone toward hope. In several earlier conversations with me, Craig had said they were working more in South Florida area while looking at leads as far as New York. I felt a change in direction, but my family and our team of advisors were more interested in facts and did not share my intuition that things had been progressing behind the scenes. It turned out they were very wrong. Two years of excruciating anticipation were wiped away with one momentous phone call, and my trial life truly began. On May 25th of 2016, I received a phone call from Craig at midnight to say they had been gathering serious evidence and several important developments had occurred. They had picked up Sigfredo Garcia, the very first person publicly named by law enforcement as involved in Dan's murder. I called Wendi in the morning to give her a heads up. There would be a police press conference later in the day, possibly about an arrest. She proceeded to call me back several times, almost frantically, to get as many details as possible. I was in constant contact with Craig and was advised by him not to have any more communication with Wendi that day. It would be one of the last times I ever had an extended conversation with her. Yeah, Kristen's on chapter 4. Yep. Mia Wallace. That right there is the reality. Ruth had to endure a nightmare and move past it in order to have a connection with her grandsons in any way possible. Yep. Juliet, what's my email? It's truecrimeinaminute@gmail.com. And thank you, Kristen. Yes, you're so good. But if you also click, if you're on my YouTube channel and you click on the description, it's got it there. Melissa, yeah. Right. So who benefited? Oh my God, it angers me so much. Wendy's walking around. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Donna, Kristen says, I bet Donna and Wendy never contacted a child psychologist. More proof they did it. Yeah. I remember in that email that Donna and Wendy were writing about he's in the box under the dirt. She's like, this shows how psychologists are, or something like, did they put those words into him? So, yep. I thought that was very telling, though, that Isom was like, yeah, you don't need to talk to Wendi anymore. She says, in retrospect, calling Wendi to give her a heads up was a result of my desire to maintain a working relationship with her for the sake of the two boys. I was trusting and cared so deeply for the safety of the children. She says the news media coverage was limited for the first few days as police kept information private to not jeopardize the ongoing investigation. The released information was quick and to the point. Garcia had been arrested for a first-degree murder after nearly 2 years of investigation. He was arrested in Miami by the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Hollandale Beach Police Department, the Tallahassee PD, and a full range of cooperating law enforcement agencies. Then she says, the New York Times reported on Garcia's criminal record, and the Tallahassee Democrat on May 26, 2016, shared how Garcia had been arrested multiple times in the past as both a teenager and adult on charges that included criminal mischief, assault with a weapon, car burglary, strong arm robbery, and possession of cocaine. This was a lot to digest, not just for our family, but for so many. People were shocked, confused, baffled. A law professor was murdered by a lowlife who drove up from Miami to kill him. Why? For what? On the same day, we heard from many of Dan's friends and family. Our personal support system worked and paralleled the criminal process. My murder coach, Abe, reminded us to get ready with the photos of your son in better days, which would be all over the news. I am blessed with this outside influence. It was at that time Matt Price's wife wrote his father, Abe, telling him there had been an arrest. Abe wrote to me, good morning, Ruth. Do you think they have the right man and why he did it? How do you feel? He continued writing later at night. We know the feeling. If they have the right man, it may take time, but you have the knowledge it can only get better. Your heart yearns for closure while your mind searches for justice. Then it says, you will soon be exposed to publicity. Remember, it can be your friend or your enemy. Truth be told, that will be up to you. If you ignore the press, they will find and make up their own stories. If you cooperate, you may be able to put your spin on it. That is when it is about to happen. All the best. If you want to talk, call me. Our next court date is 2 weeks away, June 9th, when the trial dates of the whole family get set, probably for the fall, when it will all end for us. We are in year 11, so that respect, you have been lucky, Abe. Abe was right. There was a media surge. Then she says, Wendi on May 27th lauded the investigation and said, the arrest this week offered some closure for her and the children. Ruth says, for my family, however, closure was far from felt. And that's the end of page 79. So they had retained attorneys. I think it was actually pro bono with Gibson Dunn. I believe Amy Adler might have set that up for them, I think. She said, we became even more in the know about Florida and U.S. politics during that time. That breakthrough was quick to come. The probable cause affidavit in the arrest of Garcia, who faced a murder charge in Dan's death, was unexpectedly and perhaps inappropriately released shortly after on June 2nd, the day Garcia made his first appearance before the judge. I say inappropriately because at that point, there was still a concern that by releasing the documents that early, other possible co-conspirators could be tipped off about details that perhaps they'd be better off yet knowing. So that's what we were talking about, earlier. Then it was giving Katie and Charlie the heads up. It contained significant information that had never been made public, including that investigators believed motives for this murder stemmed from the desperate desire of the Adelson family to relocate Wendi and the children to South Florida, along with pending court hearings that might have impacted their access to their grandchildren. Indeed, the probable cause revealed the unthinkable. Wendi's mother, Donna, and her brother, Charlie, were named as unindicted co-conspirators, meaning that law enforcement, okay, so there it was, Donna and Charlie were named, meaning that law enforcement alleged they had been involved in planning the murder and named them in an indictment, but had not personally indicted them for this crime. The news was shattering. Armand says, my understanding, being named unindicted co-conspirator is to admit hearsay evidence against a defendant. Huh. I didn't know that. Here for Today says they could get an expert witness on child grief. Keller, you said Tuto and Tato were members of the Latin Kings. Andrew says, hi, crimesters. Hello. Yeah, I agree here for today. Ruth has handled the press with grace and class. She definitely has. Yeah, Rebecca says Sigfredo was not a Latin king. That's what I thought too. Juana Castillo, don't give up. Never, 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 never give up. Maestro. Ruth is a saint. My mom would definitely have punched Wendi in the face. Oh, my mom too. My mom chased my ex-husband with a wooden spoon, calling him a chicken shit. And this is a true story. Okay. Furthermore, the probable cause affidavit revealed the identities of two other suspected co-conspirators, Garcia's childhood best friend, Luis Rivera, and Katie McBanois, the mother of Garcia's two children, who was also, prior to and around the time of the murder, dating Charlie Adelson. There were no details as to why the document was unsealed. Georgia Kappelman, the assistant state attorney, said she believed the judge unsealed the document on his own motion. Then she talks about Katie McBanawa. She said the alleged connection to McBanawa was different. While she had never traveled to Tallahassee, she was personally involved with both Garcia and Rivera and the Adelson family. As noted, McBanawa has 2 children with her common law husband, Garcia, and was dating Charlie Adelson prior to and around the time of the murder. Investigators also showed that McBanawa had started receiving checks from the Adelson family business just after the murder, all of them signed by Donna herself. It was a lot to process, to say the least. The period of arrest was fast-paced and eventful, so much that one time we attended a Toronto grandparent event for an hour, and when we finished, there had been a whole new development. Lots of texts, Google announcements, and continuous internet searches were part of this time period. It had certainly changed from the waiting, slow pace of the last 2 years. Now we were on a treadmill with an incline. Once the arrests were made, our experience in the justice system was suddenly transformed. After these arrests, Craig Isom and Sarah Latour, our victim support advocate with Tallahassee PD, informed the family that we would now be working with the state attorney's office. Our journey as victims was changed permanently, so we became accountable to the victims program at the state attorney's office. We were introduced to Helene Potluck, our new victim support liaison, and Georgia Kappelman, the prosecutor assigned to work on the criminal case, trials, and convictions. Kappelman worked under State Attorney Willie Meggs, who was elected to the role in 1985 and had served ever since. We would later be introduced to his successor, Jack Campbell, who was elected in the fall of 2016 and assumed office in January of 17. In our first call with Kappelman, we established a line of communication. We expressed our gratitude and learned more about the process going forward with the prosecutor's office. We had a plan for that call. Shelley opened the call and said that we appreciate the efforts and information and appreciate the same from the state attorney's office. Shelley then introduced Orrin Snyder and Matthew Benjamin. She explained that Ruth and Phil were not lawyers. They were grieving, and they found it especially useful to have some help navigating these unfamiliar and emotionally charged issues. Very smart. Then she talks about how they basically had to get a new vocabulary. She says, our vocabulary expanded to include new words such as defendant, hearings, judgments, witnesses, trials, jury selection, death penalty, conviction, appeals, court process and procedures, opening statements, closing arguments, and deliberations and verdicts. These words became our soup du jour for us. We also learned that our case was complicated by different criteria, standards for evidence for state, federal, and conspiracy crimes. So I think we're starting to see more pieces to the puzzle pieces. Hey, welcome, Cynical. Happy you're here. Armand, if Wendi goes to trial, Ruth will have to testify to bring evidence in of Wendi's behaviors and actions. Here for today, there is constant new technology about phones and retrieving data could help get what they could not before. That's true. As these events of early June evolved, my family became increasingly worried about the children. While we were in the river of information during the arrest period, my worries were in the sewers. Our communication was dormant with the boys. My concerns were mounting. Are they secure? Are they hurt? What do they hear? A few days after the original Tallahassee conference on May 26, I got permission from Craig to write Wendi. I sent her a brief email on June 6 through our advocate, Sarah Latour. Dear Sarah, thank you again for all your support. I am asking you to pass this message to Wendi with Craig's approval. Please forward to Wendi from your office. We will connect directly later to Wendi with Craig's support. Please share this email with Craig Isom. Dear Wendi, it has taken me a few days to get on my feet. We are concerned. How are Benjamin and Lincoln? How are you? Please keep us posted, Ruth. Despite efforts to communicate with the boys and Wendi, we had no contact. She never replied, and I yearned for news of their well-being. It was very hard to feel any peace. June 24, 2016 was Garcia's first bond hearing for bail. State Attorney Meggs had approved the charges against Garcia and Rivera, but stated publicly that he did not believe there was enough evidence for further arrests. Many consider this to be highly unusual behavior for a tenured prosecutor and saw it as Meggs undermining the investigation, or worse, potentially crippling the case against Magbanua or members of the Adelson family. Internet sleuths puzzled over it, coming up with all kinds of theories, but for our family, the trauma of uncertainty continued. Months passed. Little did we know, a lot was happening in the silence. Rebecca, you said Campbell has no opponents in town. I wish, would Georgia ever run for that? Oh, Rebecca says, even the former mayor thought Charlie was guilty. Interesting. She talks about, while incarcerated for charges, Rivera decided to cooperate with authorities. On October 1st, 2016, Rivera gave an unrecorded proffer or offer to cooperate. On October 4th, Rivera provided another proffer, this time recorded. Wouldn't you love to know about that unrecorded one? And Ruth does say, to me, the deal made with Rivera was worthwhile. Then she talks about Katie being arrested. On Saturday, October the 1st, 2016, this is page 86, police arrested Magbanua and charged her in connection with Dan's murder. This information did not truly start to circulate the press until Monday, October 3rd. Many articles had already speculated on her involvement and predicted this development, as she was named throughout the probable cause affidavits released relating to Garcia's and Rivera's arrest. Then I thought this was interesting. She talked about how the media was staying on top of the case. She said, conflict continued to arise between the Tallahassee police, the FBI, and the state attorney's office. The police and the feds thought they had enough evidence to arrest the members of the Adelson family. But once again, Meggs disagreed. We were frustrated that these various entities were not joining forces to find out what happened to Dan and were instead waiting to see what unfolded with the suspects. Meggs held his position of not supporting further arrests at that time, despite his impending retirement. It was a terrible conflict to witness. Then she says, my last communication with Wendi was on October 13th, 2016. We tried to reach her. After that point, to no avail. That was Lincoln's birthday, and I had a gratifying video chat with the children that day. Now began another journey of waiting. After the fast-paced experience of the arrest, the progression of the case felt like it came to a halt, and we entered a period of disappointment. We were waiting again with more uncertainty. It was at this time I began to describe my life as living on a roller coaster. Hey, Rebecca, thanks for being a member for 2 months. It's hard to believe. Kristen, member for 3 months. Thank you so much. We need merch, Tally T. Huh, that's cute. All right. So she says Magbanua was originally set to go to trial February 2017. However, this trial date got postponed to give both sides more time to prepare their cases and deal with new evidence. Her trial was then postponed to January 2018. Garcia was able to extend his trial date to January 2018 and then a second time to July 2018. At this point, Judge Hankinson noted that he had delayed the trial twice and didn't intend to do so again. At first, the state prosecutor decided to try each person involved in the crimes separately. This decision was good for the trial and evidence gathering, but because of its inevitably drawn out results, it was tough for my own life sentence. Listen to this. The public defenders for McBanawa and Garcia bowed out due to a possible connection with Dan, but the defendants were able to find private lawyers to take their cases. This led to rampant and enduring speculation. Who was paying for their services? Good question. Rebecca says, I've only met a few people who know about this case, even after all the years. Yeah, people I know from Tallahassee, they're like, I don't really know anything about it. Like, what? Garcia would face the death penalty. So then, Kappelman then moved to combine the trial of McBanawa and Garcia. We were still waiting and experiencing all the agony of delays in the justice system from 2017 to 2019. The defense attorneys didn't want their clients to be tried together, but Judge Hankinson allowed the trials to be combined. The joint trial finally occurred in September of 2019. Homicide trials are things that you can work on your entire life and still find more work to do, Kappelman says. But eventually, you need to draw the line in the sand and get some closure for the family. Just love her. We learned about the use of extensive wiretapping of Catherine and Charlie and what detectives learned from listening in, particularly following the use of a sting orchestrated by the FBI. She talks about the bump. She says the undercover officer handed Donna a printout of an article about Dan's murder with a demand for $5,000, saying he was aware of how the family was helping Katie and Tuto, and they needed to do the same for his brother, Tato, who had helped Donna's family with a problem up north. The FBI officer was essentially suggesting that the Adelson family was properly paying McBanawa and Garcia for the murder, but that the third participant, Rivera, was not adequately compensated. The exchange with the undercover agent scared Donna, and she called Charlie immediately after the encounter, but she chose her words carefully in that call. After talking with Donna a few times, Charlie made one specific call to McBanawa. She was the only ex-girlfriend he would call about the issue. He told McBanawa that his mother had been approached by someone looking for money. Again, this is interesting because while the undercover agent did say Katie's name, Donna did not say her name to Charlie. Yep. Let's see. Yeah, Maestro says, so we know after Katie got arrested, Charlie's lawyer called Isom instantly. He probably also called Meg's, and so those statements were made. Yep, I think that's probably pretty good. Leslie, what is a JDA? A joint defense agreement. So that was with all the attorneys. They were all working together on the story and everything. Think about that. And she talks about the bump. Charlie would talk to Donna, and then Charlie would talk to McBanawa. Then McBanawa and Garcia would talk to one another before McBanawa and Charlie would speak again. We also discovered that while Rivera and Garcia were paid in cash for Dan's murder, McBanawa allegedly received part of her own payment in cash, bank deposits, a succession of luxury gifts and trips, and a breast enhancement performed by Miami plastic surgeon known as Dr. Bubner. So I found this guy. I thought I would share his website. This is him, Dr. Lenny. I think his last name is Rudner, but I guess he goes, the nickname is Dr. Bubner. So there he is. But he has really good reviews online, just so y'all know, in case anyone's interested. While we were impressed with all the information that law enforcement was able to collect, our family was also traumatized thinking about the environment that Benjamin and Lincoln were being raised in. We worried about the influences they were being exposed to and about the character and morals of the closest people in their lives. Once arrests were made, there was a lot of public displeasure and concern about Benjamin and Lincoln living in that environment. Then she talks about Wendi's interview was released. She says things became much darker when the police released Wendi's 5-hour interview with detectives on the day of Dan's murder. Some clips of this interview had circulated through media coverage, and much of it landed on YouTube for the scrutiny of anyone who wanted to watch. In the footage, Wendi demonstrated a range of emotions, including disbelief and sadness, while still somewhat composed and alleging ignorance of why it could have happened. We always had known that Wendi had several alibis, and we never thought she herself had pulled the trigger. But we didn't realize that following the murder, she had gotten so close to the scene. And that was the drive down Trescott. She says Wendi drove many miles out of her way to purchase Bullet brand whiskey, pronounced Bullet, from a liquor store about a block from Dan's home, but this would have been easily available closer to her home or lunch destination. This raises eyebrows to this present day. Why would Wendi choose a liquor store so far away from where she lived and where she was going to next? And even so, why choose to drive there on a route that put her on Danny Street, a small, winding residential road, rather than driving on the main road to get there? Wendi had told Craig that she chose that route because it helped her come to terms with the divorce. Regardless of her intent that day, Wendi encountered police tape once on Trescott. Oh, I have a visual for this. You can get so many things on Amazon. Yep, this is what this says. Crime scene, do not cross. I have a whole roll of this. Wendi encountered the police tape. After all, the murder had happened just over an hour prior, and the scene was teeming with authorities. Despite the emergency vehicles she must have witnessed on a street her children lived on too, did Wendi call to check on Dan or the boys? Then she talks about in one of the statements that stood out chillingly was about Charlie. Quote, he knew that Danny treated me badly, and it was always joked. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, but it was cheaper to get you this TV. She had told the exact same story to the TV repairman who had been at her home that very morning. Not the kind of thing that is funny or normal in any exchange. She also says another interesting thing in the interview, Wendi asked Craig Isom multiple times who would do this, suggesting that she was uninvolved. She seemed to insulate herself from scrutiny by disclosing her brother's, quote, joke about having looked into hiring a hitman. She also implied that perhaps someone had done this to Danny, thinking it would be good for her. Wendi's tears can be interpreted in many ways, as sadness, yes, or even as relief. Then she says, at the time, Wendi herself had not even been named as a suspect, as her mother and brother allegedly were in 2016. And even in their case, authorities were still looking for something more concrete in order to bring charges. The police and the FBI have reluctantly held off on taking any of them into custody. So this is obviously before Charlie's arrest. On a very personal level, Craig Isom shared with me that Garcia's arrest was postponed to protect me and my time with the boys. 3 weeks before his arrest, I was in Miami with Benjamin and Lincoln. My last visit was April 30th, just a few days after the bump had occurred, unbeknownst to me, and the arrest was May 25th. I always appreciated Craig's gesture and cherish memories of that visit. You have to love that. Yeah, I wasn't concerned. Oh, and Andrew, it absolutely is for my next podcast with Jackie St. Germain. Absolutely. We've got stuff planned. Oh, Nancy, interesting. I live in Tallahassee and their home in person looks smaller and close to the road. Yeah, Kristen, I agree. She brings up a hitman on the same day as the murder by a hitman. Georgia should say this in the closing. I love that. Yep. Okay, we're about wrapping this up. She says, as I've been working closely with Craig Isom and Pat Sammer with the FBI, I became introduced to even more criminal language such as autopsies, bullets, evidence, charges, warrants, bumps, and stings. After the arrest, I started to have more upsetting thoughts about the possibility that the boys could be in danger or could even end up exposed to further unnecessary trauma. What if they are at a park, a school, or the beach and the police swoop in? Could the boys be taken by Florida's Department of Children and Families and put in foster care before anyone has contact with us? I reached out to Jewish Adoption and Family Care Options, JAFCO, located in South Florida, and inquired about a potential emergency backup plan to avoid any foster care and maintain continuity with family members for the boys. Regrettably, my email to the state attorney's office relaying my communications with JAFCO were accidentally released for discovery, and it became available in the media. With crushing consequences, Wendi falsely inferred that I was trying to take the boys away from her. And she forbid me and my family from seeing the children or having any more contact with them. It was the end of our communication with the boys and a turn of events almost as terrible as losing Dan. As previously mentioned, it wasn't as though Wendi was receptive to our communications during this period of arrest anyway, and the timing of her cutting us off easily happened anyway without the JAFCO message. That said, the email did give Wendi something she could point to as a reason for cutting off contact, and it was a decision that caused us enormous and ongoing pain. And then the executive director of JAFCO even released a statement clarifying that, this was just going to be a temporary thing until Ruth could get there. As previously mentioned, following the arrest, Phil and I were unceremoniously blocked from seeing Dan's children, our grandchildren, while Wendi's family enjoyed unlimited access to them. Parental rights laws in Florida are strongly predisposed toward birth parents, and most grandparents do not have the liberty to file a lawsuit to ask for visitation rights with their grandchildren, let alone pursue litigation. The gravity of this reality shook us once again. According to Alienated Grandparents Anonymous, children who are blocked from having an emotionally close bond with their grandparents are at a higher risk of mental health problems. Those boys have been through tremendous loss. I think we've talked about this before. Obviously, their father. They were close to Jeff Lacoste. Their Uncle Charlie was arrested. Their grandparents, their cousins, their aunt, their uncle. This is like a domino effect. This is not just one loss. They are indeed the victims. Not only am I crushed about the estrangement from Dan's children, but the entire family is destroyed. I feel I let him down. How can I tell this to Dan? Here is where I have to lift the veil to personal suffering. I have frequent visits to Dan's grave, but I am consumed with fear to share that Dan that I'm not able to see his children. If his mother can't come through for his children, who can? We tried to contact Wendy's lawyer through our lawyers, but there was no progress toward resolution, and the silent treatment continued. I felt punched again and ready to fall to the bottom of the rabbit hole. The situation did have physical repercussions. I became diagnosed with atrial fibrillation and was introduced to the world of cardiac rehab and heart medications. As always, I climbed out of the rabbit hole, this time more dependent on support. I had been introduced to the idea of writing a bill on grandparents' rights by Matthew Benjamin, one of our lawyers from Gibson Dunn. Sarah Franco from Jafco became a guiding light and mentioned that we needed to get lobbyists. These suggestions were heard deeply, and though it was not yet the time to pursue those things, instead the seeds were planted, and it would be 3 years before they resurfaced. Then let's see. Talks about there was more information coming in. We were plunged into the investigation outcome in a murder for hire reality. We learned about victim rights. We were provided links to victims' rights information. We then contacted Helene Potluck, our victim liaison support person from the state attorney's office. She advised us that our role as next of kin is to have the right to participate, to be informed, the right to be heard, and the right to speak. We also learned that Georgia Kappelman intended to be our prosecutor and kept our case. Yes. Awesome. Then our protocol going forward was to put all questions from the media to Gibson Dunn. Any inquiries from law enforcement, the state prosecutor's office, or the media should be directed to the cell phone number listed below. She talks about all of the different media headlines. I mean, there were dozens. And then she again talks about the conflicts. She talks about lessons learned in the arrests. And the second one, she says, politics and conflict. There appeared to be friction between law enforcement and the FBI and the state attorney's office on the timing of the release of documents. As I was handling the law enforcement relationships, it became obvious to me that I needed to keep separate contact with all the agencies. Interesting, isn't it? You would think everybody would be on the same team. Even after the arrest, this proved to be very fruitful for my own understanding of the courts and the criminal system. She talks about how they did family meetings and updates. They had regular communications. So she was kind of spearheading all of this with the law enforcement while Shelley and Phil were handling like Dan's financial things. They became expert in criminal terms. She said, and we still had many questions relating to who was paying the defendants' legal fees. Yep. We all wonder. She said on page 101, The media no comment was the example of a statement. We quickly learned to follow a strict drill of no comment when we went public. It was deliberate and well-timed. We requested that the media respect our privacy. The following example is a family statement that had purposeful timing. Although it does not diminish their immense pain, Ruth, Phil, and Shelley are grateful to local, state, and federal authorities for their tireless work resulting in today's arrest. They are also thankful to Dan's friends and local community for their love and support since Dan's tragic murder. They will have no further comment at this time and ask that you respect their privacy. Orrin Snyder, attorney for Ruth, Phil, and Shelley Markel. She said, press conference says, many times the updates from law enforcement have new information that is unfamiliar to the victims and their family members. So they learn it at the press conference as well. Evidence becomes the mantra of a new belief system. Is there enough evidence? Does it meet the standard for criminal evidence? What is the credibility of the witness? Is this the right evidence for this crime? So I think that is what we need to keep repeating to ourselves while we're all in this watch period. Uncertainty, she says, waiting becomes your life work. Unlike TV shows, a crime is not solved in 1 hour. The justice system is very complex and unnerving. Even after arrests had been made, we were waiting again for trials and appeals. Advocacy. We chose the roadmap to find justice with legislation and writing new bills, as will be shared in depth in the chapters to come. So we did it. All right. Andrew says, do we know why after 30 years Ruth and Phil got divorced? We don't. But they were separated before Dan was killed. Julia, I agree. Markels are quality people. Florida Adelsons are not. I agree. Hey, Julia, don't you live in Vegas? Are you going to CrimeCon? Have I asked that? Yeah, I agree, Mia. The way Ruth was treated is so sickening. We all see it. Andrew, I don't know. We don't know why. I mean, things happen. They've never said. I mean, they do a great united front. I mean, more power to them. Can't imagine that in my situation. Yeah, Kristen, people grow apart, but I bet Dan's death made them all closer. Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much here for today. 30 years together is pretty good, though. Yeah, it is. So next Sunday is Mother's Day. I am totally fine. I mean, this, Mother's Day is about us, right? So I'm still planning to do this. If you don't want to watch because it's Mother's Day and you're going to be doing something else, that's fine. But you can watch it on replay. And anybody that's listening on replay, thank you. Oh, Julia, you live in San Diego now. I'm going to volunteer each day. Oh, good. Julia, look for me. I'll be in these kind of shirts. And I'll have sparkly tennis shoes on. You'll know who I am. Thanks, Juliet. Sleep well, everybody. Yes, I think I love this book club. So I appreciate all of y'all being here. And email me if you're interested in the autographed copy. So it would be more expensive than what it is on Amazon because you're going to have to pay. It's expensive to ship it from Canada and it'll be a hardback, but I'm going to get one because I really, really want to get one. Yes, great chatters. Awesome chat as always. Oh, yes. Please check out John Smith's song. I forgot to play it, but I'll do it next time. And y'all have a great week. Tomorrow's Monday. Ooh. Bye. like and subscribe because every case has more to the story. I'm Leslie B.